Good morning, everyone. This is Eric Hayden from the Weather Service in Newport, along with Sarah Jameson. We're going to go over our briefing, just a couple housekeeping items. This will be the last webinar that we anticipate with Florence. We will continue to update the PDF slides as needed, so you'll receive them just like you have been in your inbox. And we will also post them to the website and social media. So we won't stop updating the briefing slides, but this, as of now, will be our last webinar. The main focus of this is going to be hydrology, so you'll hear mostly from Sarah, but we're just cleaning up a couple things on the tropical storm wind side, and then we'll turn it over to her. And our threat really shifting. We're seeing the flash flooding continuing now, but focusing on the developing catastrophic river flooding here in the coming days. So that'll be the main focus of this webinar this morning. Main points, a few tweaks to this slide, mainly to lower the impacts of wind and surge. We're still seeing some issues, especially some of the outer rain bands, heavier periods of rain with some winds picking up and some moderate impacts with surge. But again, the main emphasis will be shifting to water with regards to flash flooding and river flooding. We've highlighted it all week, but continuing to kind of update you on some of that information. Summary of greatest impacts, you'll notice a little bit of good news, the wind and surge aspect, the impact is lessening, but again, extreme impacts across our area continue. They are ongoing with water. That will continue. Still have the tornado threat. That is diminishing, starting to slide out of our area, more toward Wilmington's forecast area, but we still have a watch out, and we'll go over that here at the end. Briefly on this slide, Florence, 45 mile per hour winds, continues to drift inland. Really not concerned about the track as much as just that slow movement that will continue, and the result of that, these rain bands that are coming in, I know some folks are starting to see some improvement off to our north and east, but those folks that are still seeing rain, it's still going to be a slow process, very, very slow movement with this storm, so emphasizing that point. Wind threat remains elevated over those areas in yellow. The main points with that, you've noticed that the wind has substantially come down from yesterday, but when we have those bands come on, some of the heavier rain bands, that's when we'll see some gusts pick up now and then. And of course we have saturated soils, so it won't take much to still cause some more trees down and things of that nature. Storm surge threat, we mentioned elevated to moderate. This will continue to lessen as we shift our focus more on freshwater flooding along the rivers and the flash flood that we have going on now. Speaking of that, the bulk of this briefing will be Sarah, and then we'll cover the tornado threat at the end.
Okay, thank you, Eric. All right, everybody, what we're going to start off here is with the storm surge. We're seeing the recession. We're in low tide right now. That is helping with a lot of the areas that are influenced by the tide. As Eric said, the storm surge impacts are waning. It's going to take a little bit of time, though, for that water to fully recede. So a lot of areas still being impacted. These are some gauges from around the area this afternoon. As you can see, a lot of areas are still in the flooding situation, but we're seeing a gradual recession of those levels, which is really good to see. And another factor that these the higher these gauges are, the water levels in these areas, the more of a backwater effect we get on the fresh water. So we really want to see these stations come down, let that water recede to allow the fresh water that's coming upstream to drain out into the sounds and into the ocean. Okay, but let's talk about the flooding threat. This area really highlights the current threat locations. The rain bands have really shifted to the west as Florence continues its track in that direction. We're still getting a pretty good band over portions of Onslow and Duplin County, maybe clipping a little bit of Lenore and Jones, but I think we're starting to get a little bit more favorable with at least the intensity of the rainfall coming down in those areas, which of those of you who are in that area, it's been pretty intense for quite some time. It was quite a wet night. Several areas got about a foot of rain along that one band, so pretty significant flash flooding that occurred as a result of it, and it's still ongoing. Here is what the observed rainfall as of 7 a.m. this morning. Unfortunately, we were talking feet going into this event, and I hate to say that that's what we ended up with. And we're seeing an improvement in the rainfall as the storm shifts west. Still a lot of impact expected over there in Duplin. Your numbers as of 7 a.m. weren't as high, but that is going to change as that band makes a very, very slow progression to the west. Carteret County, Pamlico, Craven, the rain is moving less intense in your area. We're not going to see too much additional accumulation. I'd say, maybe at most another 1 to 2 inches. So the flooding that you're seeing right now is probably going to be exacerbated just due to the runoff, but not much more caused by additional rainfall, though. The additional rain bands over the next 24 hours are going to be kind of more hit and miss and not a long duration. But we are looking at a continued rain chance over the next 24 to 36 hours. Oh, actually, I'll mention too, you might have saw in the Washington Post, it's kind of getting out there now that there was a 30-inch storm total measurement in Swansboro, correct? Swansboro, here at the office in Morehead, we've had over 2 feet of rain, or right around 2 feet of rain. So kind of an unprecedented rain event. Unfortunately, as we were mentioning going into this event, it did materialize. So as I said, the rain, and this graphic was generated a few hours ago. We had a few technical issues here. So this graphic is already a couple hours old. We're not quite expecting as much as indicated here, but it paints the picture that it's still an unfolding event there in our extreme western counties. Those eastern counties, you might expect a little bit of rain from some rain bands, but generally speaking, the heaviest threat has moved out of your area. All right, now shifting our attention to the river flooding. Unfortunately, it's looking like we've been discussing and kind of preparing for this whole week. We hate to use these, extreme terms, but we are looking at record flooding, very likely in those river basins that received the 1 to 2 feet of rainfall. That includes the Trent River, basically all of Jones County. We've got the New River in Onslow County, and we have the Northeast Cape Fear. So we continue to stand by those predictions. We are looking at record flooding exceeding Floyd levels in most instances. So a very, very, very serious situation. Conditions are just going to continue to really deteriorate in those regions. Elsewhere, going a little bit north, say 1 or 2 tier counties inland, we reach the Neuse River Basin, the Contentnia Creek, and then we get to the Tar. A little bit of uncertainty with the Tar River, and I'll talk about that in a minute. Actually, we're going to break these all down point by point. So let's take a look at them now. Chinkapin. This one continues to show the most probability of breaking a record, exceeding Floyd levels. Again, we're maintaining that 1 to 2 feet of rain, most of which has already fallen. Gum Branch, just a little note, the gauge has somehow malfunctioned and will not likely be prepared anytime soon given the conditions in the area. But we are still forecasting record rainfall and, record river stages in that area as well. We would expect that to probably come up sometime Saturday night into Sunday, but there's a little bit of uncertainty there. So we may need to kind of coordinate with the USGS moving forward. Trent River, again, expected to exceed Floyd levels. Don't be misled by what we're seeing as what appears to be a little bit of a leveling off of the river at Trenton, Pollocksville. Some of that is the fact that the storm surge is starting to wane, and then the local runoff is has already reached the rivers. But we got to worry about all the water upstream that's heading down. So we do expect Pollocksville to shoot right back up and probably exceed the Floyd levels. So again, this is a deteriorating event. We're not expecting any improvement over the next few days. Kinston. Kinston, unfortunately, did get some of that heavier rain. We knew that there was going to be a whole tier of counties that were on the fence. There was enough rain in the basin, or so it appears, that we are going to have the major flooding. The devil's in the details with the upstream areas as they are getting the rain now, and will be over the next 24 hours. So if there's some slight error in the rainfall forecast upstream, then this value, the crest value of 26 feet, could change. But right now we are saying 26 feet, give or take. We've seen a little bit of fluctuation in the last 24 hours, but if you prepare for about 26 feet, that would result in US Highway 70 being inundated once again. But levels are right now expected to be below what Matthew produced for impacts. But It's right at a very serious level nonetheless. Hookerton, you'll notice the gauge looks a little erratic there at the end. We often get that with debris and stuff, maybe bumping into the gauge. But we are pretty much at major flood stage now. It's going to continue for quite some time, especially as the news comes up and kind of backs it up. A lot of the impact from this, as we know, is not necessarily at Hookerton itself as much as it is just downstream towards the Grifton area. We're concerned about that whole tick bite, Fort Barnwell, Grifton, that whole region where the confluence of the Neuse and the Contentia are. Again, not expecting the levels seen during Matthew, but that's quite a high bar. It's still going to be quite a devastating event in those areas. The flood-prone areas are most likely to flood to significant levels once again. Tar River, a little bit more uncertainty with this because we're almost entirely dependent on how much rain is going to fall over the next 24 hours in your headwaters. With all things staying the same in our forecast, it's keeping you at minor. I'll have to tell you though, I'm not comfortable with this. I think that there's a very high likelihood that we're going to see moderate. Perhaps we're going to keep that under major, but this is a very wet system as we've all experienced recently, so continue to monitor this. I know we will. We're going to probably help refine this forecast a little bit once we get all the rainfall over those headwaters in the next 24 hours. Okay, I'm going to pass it over to Eric at this point.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. And for those that don't know, Sarah, worked with us a couple years ago. She comes back to help us quite a bit. Unfortunately, not because we don't like to see her, but unfortunately it's been a lot recently with the issues that we've had over the last couple of years. But really appreciate Sarah's service. She's come down from Cleveland and really helped us out a lot. We certainly appreciate that. One last thing, and we'll turn it over to you folks for questions. Not to ignore the threat, but it has diminished over a lot of our area, but we still do have a tornado watch in effect until 5 o'clock. That would mainly be over the southwestern part of this watch area. That's where we're seeing some of the heavier bands move onshore. So not to diminish the impact, but again, that threat is decreasing. Like we said, this will be our last webinar. We hope to put this up on YouTube, so if you're just joining us and you missed it, I hope to get that out via email and social media here within the next hour. Our next briefing will be as needed. Sarah mentioned some uncertainty with some of the crest, so we'll update as needed and put that in your email inbox through the weekend.